A train crash in Ohio creates one of the most dangerous chemical disasters in American history, leading to the death of fish, bird, and livestock everywhere. But don't worry, Pete Buttigieg is on the case. He's, in fact, one of those smart people we're supposed to entrust with our lives. All will be discussed and more here at the Politically Tolerant. I'm Cooper Brown.
I'm Zachary Groper. Yeah, first, we just really want to say our thoughts and prayers for the people of Ohio and Pennsylvania who suffered drastically after this environmental disaster. But take it over for you, Cooper, to talk
Yeah.
about what are these implications.
Yeah, so this is something that doesn't it occurs fairly frequently, like derailed trains and semis tipping over carrying dangerous chemicals and contaminant waste. This is something that happens pretty regularly, thousands of times a year actually. But this one is a little bit different. This one's a little scarier because we've seen the pictures of the giant plumes of smoke that they've caused by burning, setting fire to these train carts, which is for reasons we'll discuss. And then we now getting reports of contaminated areas and videos and pictures of people videoing birds and fishes and livestock that have died. And it's kind of a scary thing to be experiencing. So if you're in that area, recommend just to get out and do whatever you can. But if those who are unaware, on February 3rd, in a city called East Palestine, that's how they pronounce it apparently. So a train cart carrying, I believe it was like 50 or so train carts derailed and spilled various amounts of chemicals all across the area, and the state had to evacuate people within a mile radius. And the EPA then suggested brilliantly that instead of us not doing anything and letting this thing explode on its own, let's set it on fire and explode it ourselves. Which I can't. Me personally, that doesn't pass the logical test of why they would act like that. But I don't know. How are you feeling about this event?
No, it's just horrible. I mean, I see it as a neglect on both the people in Norfolk Southern, which is the railroad company, to admit fault in the situation, is also in government, at least accepting that this issue. And they were blaming, I know, Pete Buttigieg, now Department of Transportation. Ironically, the guy never even set foot on a train car, but he's Department of Transportation. He blamed Trump for this issue, even though his handling of the issue, it took him 10 days to actually even respond to the crisis itself. So there's negligence on this side. I mean, it's kind of horrific, considering that 6 years prior with the Flint water crisis that took place, that we haven't really learned from anything. And it's kind of similar to the issue now, but that was directly involved with the government. What happened in Flint, Michigan was that there was a water supply issue, but the thing was that there was no problem before. But the government in place, the state government in that situation, who was assigned tasks to the Department of Treasury to handle the water over there, assigned two people who had no experience with water and find the cheapest alternative measure to water. So instead of going through the water plants and the water plants, the federal water plants in Michigan, they went to the river. And what happened with that is that they used old pipes, and that got into the drains. What happened there is that created issues with health hazards later. It contributed a lot of diseases in people and horrific situations, and they declared a state of emergency, like what happened recently in East Palestine. But it's the same incidents as we haven't learned from that. And the problem is we're asking, like, no one has died yet. But if we look at the statistics of what happened in Flint, about 6,000, 12,000 people got exposed to lead. Now, you might think, okay, well, this can be taken care of maybe in the short term. But what happens in the future is that it leads to stuff like Alzheimer's and apparently a decrease in IQ. So we have to take this more seriously. And I think the problem is that governments in Washington don't seem like to take it seriously. Even I don't even think they even declared a federal state of emergency in East Palestine, but they did in Flint, Michigan with the Barack Obama administration.
Mhm.
So
Well, I know that the governor of Ohio has declared a state of emergency with them, but it is annoying the fact that, I mean, this is now getting covered a little bit, but not by mainstream news outlets at all. Out of several major news outlets like ABC, CBS, and NBC, they've only aired, I think, a total combined number of like 30 minutes dedicated to this instance. Compared to like now, kind of this week, it's kind of become prominent mainstream news. But again, this happened in early February, and it took getting these videos of them burning these trail carts, seeing these toxic fumes, just like collect out of the sky, being able to see them from space. If you've seen those pictures, those are really crazy. And then the reports of like people's animals and livestock dying. Now, again, we don't know the health implications for an instance like this. We might never know in the near future, but it's something that's, might take 10 or more years to manifest, that we see like, oh, people of this area now have serious health problems. And the obnoxious, ridiculous thing is that, again, I don't think that President Biden has even addressed it even the slightest, right? But generally, historically, whenever an instance like this comes, the president then goes to the state, he gives, a speech and whatever, and they like try and be unifying and bring things together, say we're going to like rebuild these things. No word whatsoever.
yeah, see, that's what I mean. That probably involves more with the division between the parties. That, well, instead of actually doing the right thing in the incidents, he doesn't want to look bad. Probably for the upcoming election. I'm not gonna lie, but he doesn't want to look
Doing
bad.
plenty of looking bad. Don't worry about
why,
that.
that's why he wants to put. Yeah, I know that's true. He looks bad in other instances, but I honestly think the problem is he doesn't want to. He wants to deflect from that and focus on the balloons and Chinese balloons instead of focusing on stuff that really matters here. And we see this neglect, even like we're talking about in Flint, even Barack Obama's administration. But since you're talking about the point with media not covering it, it could be because they don't want to make the Democratic administration look bad in the situation. I honestly think that's perhaps a cause for the reason why they're not showing a lot of media.
Right. Well, yeah, if they didn't air it so much, if no one was talking about it, then no questions would arise. It'd be like, okay, well, if it's a safe place to be, which reports say that it is, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence kind of on the ground that would make you to believe that it's not a safe place to be.
Right.
Why isn't the vice president going down there? Why isn't Joe Biden going down there for an event that is actually, it is true. This is 100% the largest chemical, disaster effect that's ever occurred on U.S. soil. So for an instance that's that big, why is there just silence from the White House? Why did it take Pete Buttigieg many, many days to bring this up? And then even when he did bring it up, he totally deflects and said, this isn't our problem. This was something of the previous administration. Except this is currently your job, dude.
Have you?
Why don't you do anything with your job now?
Well, first thing I want to talk about, yeah, it's been 2 years. Have you ever seen administration? First, I want to ask, have you ever seen an administration that's been so incompetent enough to actually blaming on a different administration because maybe it's an easy target because it's Trump? That's a first, right? That's the demoralizing part of politics nowadays. Second aspect, I was wondering, wasn't some of the problems within East Palestine was a derailment of the trains, right? The trains fell off the rail, right? Well, that was also another cause.
There was a braking issue, if I know correctly.
Right. But yeah,
But go ahead.
but yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's just incompetence of what's going on. And I was maybe just want to bring up another point before, and this maybe not a proven theory, but it's kind of a hypothesis. I was reading somewhere in a different site that a problem occurring because of what's going on within East Palestine was the fact that Norfolk Southern, which is the railroad company in there, has been pressuring the federal government to do something for 10 years in this particular city, and they haven't really done anything. Now that gets me to think, why is that the problem, right? So I did a little investigation in this matter, and I looked into this website called Open Secrets, and I asked everyone to look at it. Secrets is really uh, a website talking about lobbyist transactions within government. So it's kind of open transparency, which is pretty much the aspect of like people, lobbyists are pretty much people who want to influence legislation in the government. So within companies, they do that. So I looked more into that, and apparently Northern Southern, who is the train company, only gave $1.5 million. Now we would say, oh, that's a pretty good amount of money, but apparently not for politicians who want to buy their second home in Nantucket. Now, so, but if this is what I want to compare it to, Pfizer. Now, Pfizer gives $14 million to, which is a staggering amount compared to that, to the government. And they developed their vaccines in what, less than a year? So, and which was supposed to take an 8-year process. I know they declared a state of emergency, which permitted them to do so, but still, I was like, it's kind of weird. Which one's taking precedence? Something that directly influences people pronouncedly in East Palestine over something, that doesn't cause the deaths of everyone with the COVID vaccine. Now, what are your thoughts on that, Cooper?
I mean, it's clearly no one derailed the train cart, right? This was clearly an accident, but you do make kind of an interesting point with your tinfoil hat there, that because unions are big instance of lobbying money to particularly Democrats, and if the rail cart companies aren't supplying that as much as maybe something else is, then they fall lower and lower on the priorities list. And so then you get people neglecting things like the standards of their brakes and the rails and things like that, which lead to derailment issues like this. Another kind of instance that I kind of want to piggyback off is the EPA's kind of their actions towards this, which again, I kind of alluded to this before, that they shortly after the cars derailed, their suggestion was to burn the chemicals, which is what gives kind of those pictures like of the big plumes of black smoke and stuff like that. Those are from that. And the number of chemicals that have been released, that some media that has had a little bit of attention towards it, it's been coming out like drip by drip and stuff like that, very, very slowly. Reporters on the ground apparently were arrested because they were making, now granted, they were probably making a bit of ruckus during like town hall meetings, asking for like, what's going on here, and they got arrested for that. So definitely they've been limiting information and stuff like this, because a lot of the chemicals that are listed, that we now know that were listed on the train carts, are very dangerous chemicals. They say, it's relatively not dangerous, but for people that are concerned with the like oils and food, and with like soy and milk, I mean, some of these things are going to be really scary. Like, I don't know if I can pronounce all of these things, but vinyl chloride, phosphagen chloride, hydrogen chloride, and then, there's several others that, I'm not even going to bother pronounce because I'm stupid. But interesting enough is that some of these chemicals, there's, industrial uses for them, but when you burn them,
right,
like the EPA did, it changes the chemical makeup of some of these, that turns them literally into the same compounds that we used to gas people in World War I.
That's horrible. I mean, I know, going off of what you're talking about, this similar to Flint, isn't the water contaminated in Ohio as well? I heard
there is reports saying that there are pools of contaminated water that are circulating now. It's not completely contaminated. They say it's like plumed versions. But when you get pictures or videos of people that say like, listen, I was gone for a couple days and my chickens are dead in the yard, and they're going to be the first ones to die because they're eating from the soil and stuff like that. They're outside all the time. I mean, that's kind of like, it makes you not trust anything that's going on. And when people are just constantly saying, oh, everything's fine, but then your eyes are telling you, for people on the ground, I don't know, I haven't, I'm not there. I've not witnessed anything like physically that's going on there. But when you get those anecdotal reports from those people, it pretty scary for them.
I mean, students. I mean, it shows a neglect of this administration. They pretend to care about environmental regulations, and you know, taking it to the oil companies, right? And what you see what's going on, stuff that actually directly impacts some environmental changes, what happens with contamination of water, like you said, with the chicken and animals getting infected. And what you see with Flint is, I think things didn't get resolved. I still think in Flint, it's still not resolved today. It's just, it actually frustrates me because
Mhm.
you see them pretending to care about environmental causes, even though it's happening right in Michigan and nothing. I mean, Ohio, and no one's doing anything about it.
Mhm.
Just frustrating because what
I
the
mean,
ordinary people that no one cares about. That's my impression of it. But
it's hard to do anything in a situation like this because really, what can I mean? The damage has basically been done. The annoying part is the weakness of the administration, which is like, I'm not even going to touch this. I'm not even going to mention any of this.
and,
Um, not even. I don't think Biden has mentioned it once. I could be wrong at the time of this, but it has not happened at all. People just said like 5 words on it. Uh, Ilhan Omar has said more nice things about this than anyone else.
she wants to
Um,
free East Palestine.
right? Yeah, she Googled Palestine, and that's what came up.
Yeah, but yeah, I know. Talking about that, yeah, Biden's more concerned about trying to find UFOs than actually helping his own
Oh
citizens.
my goodness.
Yeah.
So this moves on to a little bit of kind of something else that's been going on is this not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 instances where the US has shot something out of the sky just this week.
Wow. Yeah.
And so the first instance we kind of talked about a little bit was like that clearly was there was a Chinese spy balloon going on, and Joe Biden thought it was a smart idea to let it travel the entire uh, continental US, right? From Alaska to Canada to uh, uh, like mainland all the way through to South Carolina before he shot it down over the ocean. But now he got so much bad publicity from that. He's become like super trigger happy, and anytime anything gets seen in the sky, it's just like shoot it down immediately. Like doesn't matter. Like the excuse of we have to shoot it down over water because we're afraid it's gonna fall and damage something. Um, totally terrible excuse now because now we've shot things down um, in Alaska and in Canada.
Yeah. I mean, and it shows you just like, I mean, going off of that, I mean, we see that take the US. Apparently, China is blaming, well, first, China, of course, the Chinese authorities in Beijing refuse that this actually happened, that there was a balloon in the United States.
Clearly,
Or there's like 4 that happened in Latin America, Canada, wherever. But they're also saying now that they saw some US balloons in Nepal and in China. I mean, going to the Chinese hemisphere. It's gonna be an all-out balloon Cold War. It sure seems like it right now, huh?
this is how I know that the communist Chinese party and country is just they're full of propaganda is because the fact that the United States is so much more sophisticated than sending a weather balloon with a camera over China. Like I know China has satellites that are constantly over the United States. We do too, and I bet our satellites are way better than theirs. Right? We don't need weather balloons with DSLR cameras, right? Um, taking pictures. So whenever they're just like, we have US air, balloons flying over us and we're going to shoot those down. It's like, yeah, I think you're just deflecting because you're embarrassed that um, your surveillance ability is weaker than we expected, which I mean is true at the same time as saying that China is constantly spying on the US and they generate intel just as we do, but in terms of technology and intel, like China is not relevant in that department even remotely yet.
I mean, let's talk about it. Do you think China will actually go into war with US? I mean, do you think that'll actually take place?
I mean, they'll invade Taiwan. They'll do that.
But you think US will actually, I mean, I honestly, I don't think, I mean, we can have a conversation about that. But even if China invades Taiwan, do you think US will even take actions against that?
Not this administration. They won't. They won't. They won't. What will most likely happen is, China will provide a naval blockade over Taiwan, and they'll demand the use of the super microchips that they develop, that they sell exclusively to the United States, because those will be then used in their military and their technology and stuff like that, so that they'll be able to, eventually compete militarily, technologically with the United States. Because as it currently stands, and this is something we've learned from the involvement in Ukraine, is that the military capacity of our enemies is far less than what we originally thought they would be. I don't know if you've seen those videos of China like defending its border against
India.
who was it?
It was India.
Huh?
It
It
was
was
India.
India, that's right.
When they're using sticks to fight each other.
They're using sticks to fight each other, and apparently that was considered a legitimate skirmish.
I mean,
You know,
could
could be, but
yeah.
it was so hilarious and embarrassing, where it's just hilarious to watch. But through the Ukraine conflict, we've realized that the capabilities of Russia are far less threatening than we originally, thought of. They have bodies, yes, but in terms of technological weaponry, just the United States is far superior in that regard. So any actual conflict would be really, really bad for China. And so I don't think they want, clearly they don't want that, but what they want is they need to make actions to make it so that in the future they can compete militarily with the United States.
I think
And that's what we're teetering on.
just going off of what you're talking about, because like you said, they don't want to start a war. Like you said, China hasn't been in a war since the Vietnam Chinese War, Sino War, and I think that was since the 70s. And that was a war only lasted like a year or so. So China doesn't want to go on a war. They know they can't compete with the United States. And I think it's a projection of power that they say they want, like they'll put a blockade on Taiwan. I don't even think they will invade Taiwan, because I think it gets away what they actually want to do. And what they want to do is to dominate economically in the world. And that's why that their Silk Road Initiative plan, which is pretty much and what they actually have done actually with Afghanistan, they started to have business with Afghanistan after the Taliban took over, is that they go to these places in Africa and the Middle East, and they start having economic cooperation because there's lack of trust in the United States. And what they want to do is counteract United States influence within those regions. And that's what they're trying to influence their power in those places. So that's why I see what's going on. And them going in a war of us, they know they're going to probably even lose economically. Their GDP is going to lower extensively if they go in a war with the United States. So I think they want to project power with Taiwan, but they don't really want it Taiwan, because Hong Kong, and I'll tell you why it was different than Hong Kong. You remember what happened in Hong Kong? It was like 2020, right? 2020, 2019, you think?
No, it was later than that.
Somewhere around that time, right? But there was already Chinese police in Taiwan. I don't think they want to go to Taiwan, because I think that will get rid of their power. And I know this is an interesting theory, because going on to talk about China and Taiwan, but I really don't think they want Taiwan as much as we think. I think they say they want it to just say that so they look like, they're big tough guys. But I honestly don't think they want to do that.
I mean, there's clearly a military incentive into doing so. I mean, economically, they are bleeding pretty bad. That's why I don't have as much fear as many other people do towards China, is that their only existence is propped up because of the United States' involvement with them, and the fact that we pretty much supply the demand of all their production, all of our things in China. If we stopped that or lowered that, then it would do horrific, drastic things in their economy. The thing too about China is that they're so male dominated at the moment that they have a couple million lives to expend in a war. Again, I don't think they will. I think war today is too dangerous for people, that Xi Jinping would be obliterated out of the sky immediately. Like, same thing with Putin. If there was ever a war initiated, with the United States, guarantee we're tracking these people all the time. And in 20 minutes, we'd have a missile down to them and they're gone. So no one wants wars like that. Wars are not helpful in any means. They're terrible. But we see Biden just, again, more anything he does foreign policy related is just so weak and pathetic. And I think he's overcompensating with the balloons, being so trigger happy, just shooting down anything that floats in the sky. The White House had to announce that they were positive it wasn't extraterrestrials, but they're not sure whether it was like weather balloons. And so when you're firing $400,000 rockets or missiles, sorry, at weather balloons, it's just like, what are we doing this for? We're just burning money for this sake. We don't even know. We haven't recovered any of the wreckage. We don't even know exactly what they are.
You remember when politicians were competent? Like, you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Kennedys? Now we're talking about the balloon weather crisis. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, you see the changes in politicians as a whole. I mean, I remember when they used to actually be competent. I mean, I wasn't alive, but yeah, I mean, actually, maybe I was. Who knows? But no, I wasn't. But yeah, just going off of that, we see, like you said, Biden's ineptability, foreign, domestic, doesn't really matter what it is. They can't even talk or enunciate. So we see that as a huge problem. But just talking about China, like when you're talking about China's power is increasingly lowering, and I forgot to mention this before, but Chinese birth rate, because you remember they used to have China used to have, like, I mean, they still have a lot of people, but their birth rate is going a lot lower because they implement that one child policy. So now we see China's population lowering and lowering. So I mean, that could also be a cause effect why China's rule is going to diminish in maybe the next 20 years.
That is an interesting cultural phenomenon that's been occurring. This is a little bit off topic, but the fact that I think it was released now that China's no longer at a birth rate that's high enough to like sustain like a growing population, which is basically true with every Western culture as of right now, where people are just having less and less kids. Except for like the very Christian, very religious Muslim places. Those are like the only places that have birth rates that mean that there'll be more people the next generation than there is now. And it's just these, how do I put this? Like, politicians are just, I don't know if they understand the cultural ramifications of kind of the policies that they implement, where and a lot of this is not necessarily their fault, right? This is cultural institutions that really drive people away from the common practices that bring joy and happiness, and thinking that they stem from other things. So I don't know if you followed Chelsea Handler at all recently, any of the videos that she's been posting recently.
I haven't seen her videos, but she's awful. But yeah,
go ahead. The worst comedian I think I've ever seen. But she has a series of videos that have came out this week, talking about how happy she is being this childless, I think 50-year-old woman, spinster that takes bottles of Xanax and drinks barrels of wine. And there's been poking fun at her, for the last week or so, because she does not look happy at all. She looks miserable. And you can only suspect that part of that is because as a culture, we've moved away from fulfilling our biological urges to have, children and form families and form positive communities. Instead, we just say, my genealogical line can end here. Just whatever. You can be like Chelsea Handler with cats and,
I mean, I think that is a bigger cultural issue, that we don't take precedence over tradition and culture, and more on ourselves. I mean, you can see that as selfish in a way, but also it doesn't really fulfill the life, because I mean, it is true for a lot of women, mothering is an important aspect of life, and it creates for mothers and fathers both. But have someone you can, for the future, I mean, it really benefits society and themselves as a whole. It fulfills them. And you don't really have that if you don't really have that purpose, I mean, it could definitely cause suffering in many ways. But it's also, another broader issue with the fall of Western civilization. We go on this route, right? And we say not having motherless fathers and mothers, right, will be problematic. But also, not only that, the Christian role is diminishing slowly. I mean, diminishing slowly, but it's still diminishing. And apparently, Islam is going to take over Christianity and by 2050. I heard about that. So whether that's going to have any social or cultural impact at that point, we'll see. But like you were talking about, the Muslim communities, the religious communities are going to keep having kids and kids, and the Christian communities are not going to have any. And that
well, you're in luck. The Jewish community is also having kids, so you're not likely to die off anytime soon. So
yeah, but we're like 0.5 of the population now. Nothing.
I
But
think you guys have like the highest birth rate. It's like 4 kids per family. It's something like that. Something real high.
yeah,
Yeah. But we see instances where when cultures and communities lose those religious, their religion, that their birth rates decline alongside. This was something that happened in Brazil. They at a time had like 6 children per family, and now they're down to like 1.2 or something like that in the last several decades. So it is a huge problem, especially if you're Elon Musk. You think, gotta have as many kids as possible.
doesn't he have like 8? That's right.
He's got a ton of kids, but good for him. He's got the money.
Bro, he's like a basketball player. Don't they have like 20 kids, 20 different baby mamas? Yeah, but I mean, it's true, man. It really is, and I think a lot of it is a loss of religion, and because if you don't have a religion, if there's nothing building in there, everyone's atheist. I mean, I'm not a religious person, though I do have a feeling God, whatever. Besides my religious standing,
Ethnically religious.
ethnic. Well, I mean, I believe in God. Whatever. Besides the point, it's not a conversation about Jesus or God right now. but besides that, religion brings a sense of purpose in people, and to have that and to build, the future of society. But if you don't have that traditional values and social structure encompassing that, I mean, that's why people just think, okay, I'll just have a bunch of sex with as many partners as possible and not really care about having children because that birth control, whatever. But it is really not only affecting whatever our future as Americans or as Europeans, whatever, as a Western civilization, it's also affecting lives of people, because at the end of the day, not having kids, not having religion, and it's just going to leave them suffering and, taking up these causes like Antifa does. And I know that's very far-fetched, but it really does, you don't have a purpose. You're going to want to cling on to something radical like Antifa or any radical organization that find a purpose if you don't have religion continuity with a community. So, I mean, I know what we deviated a lot from talking about Ohio into like the fall of Western civilization. But
well, that's always important stuff,
right?
Because it's something that we're experiencing very rapidly, this very rapid decline, and it's very important to talk about it as much as possible whenever we get the chance.
Right. No, it's absolutely true. Before, I just want to talk about like your thoughts. We'll see how it goes for the congressional hearings, but I thought I would mention this with Jim Jordan, who was important in the congressional hearings last week. We talked a little bit about him, but he gave subpoenas to CEOs of Twitter, not Twitter, actually not Twitter this time, of Facebook, Instagram, Google, and YouTube. But the person in YouTube actually resigned, so she doesn't have to worry about it.
Wow.
Any complicit of we'll see, but we'll see what happens with that. But I just think it's important. Like, do you think, Cooper, okay, what can happen to these subpoenas in these talks? Any continuity or any demonstration of censorship you think that'll actually be shown within these hearings after these subpoenas?
I think clear. I mean, there already has been. There's been so many leaked documents, so many leaked emails. As close to proving that they've been colluding as much as possible as you can. But again, I'm going to take out my same position we talked about, I think last week, that, all these things occur, but does anything really change? Did any of these people really get held liable to any of their actions? No, not really. And that's the annoying thing about processes like this. A lot of it's for show. We'll see what comes about. This is something that's, fairly new, and hopefully, more information will come about it in the future.
Yeah. Oh, it's really good talk. I mean, we'll see what happens with the Twitter files, but before we end, because I think we have to close around soon. But I just really want to thank all of you guys for watching our political videos, and wherever you are, in Reddit, YouTube, Rumble, doesn't matter. I really appreciate it. And we want you guys to come and watch our shows more often. And so, because we have a lot of fun stuff planned ahead, content wise, and not only our podcasts, which are always obviously thrilling, but we have a lot of other stuff to talk about. And just come and subscribe, and just to show your support. And then we really want to deliver more and more, and you know, keep this thing running, right? And show the powers in the Biden administration they got someone to fight against. So
there's some young people that are willing to speak their mind, I guess.
exactly.
Again, this is a fun thing that I've never expected anything of this, but I certainly enjoy doing it, and I enjoy talking politics with you. This is what most of my day is made up of, is working around this political field. So I enjoy any chance I get to speak and share my opinions.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. Yeah, it's only benefit us, but hopefully benefit the viewer too. But yeah, I love talking to you, Cooper, and it's always a pleasure. And let's keep it up. Let's keep this movement against Biden up, and I'll see you next week.
See you, brother.